good conclusion should be pretty brief. You basically just want to go over your working thesis, your thesis if you have two thesis statements in a paper. For paper 5, you don't have that. You're just having your working thesis because we're not answering whether or not a source is good for you or whether or not you think you should be approved for research. So there's just one primary reason to write, and that is to prove your working thesis true. So conclusion should just include your thesis statements or statement, a map of your claims, and some of the key evidence you introduced in the main paper. So this seems pretty straightforward and simple, but this is the most common thing that really students miss the opportunity to wrap up well. Because what I find in the conclusion, especially if you get excited about your work, is you go off topic, right? So what I see oftentimes are papers that will go over the thesis and the claims, maybe a little bit of proof, and then it starts introducing new ideas because you're excited about where this would go forward, what it would look like in the future. You start introducing maybe what your audience or your reader should do. You want to avoid that. If you have someone on board with your ideas and opinions, they're on board with you, let them end up there on their own naturally. That's going to be more impactful to people than you telling them what they should think, or what they should do or how they should act, right? People are a bit turned off by that. They want to intelligently make their own decisions given evidence. So let's go over an example of what a conclusion might look like. I've highlighted here the thesis in red and the claims in blue. So my thesis for one of my papers that I've written was the limitations most computer-mediated peer review systems impose inherently handicap an essential element of the peer review process, reflection that triggers high-level cognitive learning. So what am I saying here? I'm saying that if you're using a computer, you don't learn as much if you're using a computer during the peer review process. It does this in several ways, so I go over 3 reasons why this happens. First, reflection often occurs in freshman composition when students experience agreement and disagreement. So in other words, when you're looking at someone in the face, you can see slight variations of expression that you cannot pick up via the internet if you're not looking at someone's face. Those slight variations tell you if, even if their words are saying you did great, if their face is saying you need to work a little bit more, that's a big deal. That those slight variations are a big deal, what research has shown. Secondly, many researchers cite anonymity as a benefit of peer review. People like the feeling of being anonymous. Even if you know someone's name, you don't really know them, right? But social important interactions that empower students to value their own ideas cannot take place in anonymous situations. So we see basically that when you're anonymous, you lose that uncomfortable. Like it's slightly uncomfortable to have someone know you and judge you for you. And the internet is anonymous. We see this often, like people have screen names that have nothing to do with who they really are, and they say horrible things. They're trollers, right? They troll the internet and say horrible things, and they feel like they can do that because their reputation isn't on the line. But if you put their reputation on the line, now it's correcting behavior. It's making them uncomfortable enough to think about what they're doing more. Well, when you put this in the terms of doing peer review, making you uncomfortable enough because who you are is on the forefront to think about what you're doing and giving your paper to somebody else and then what someone else is doing, the results in writing are actually better. You have better results in writing. So being uncomfortable is good. It's good for learning. And then lastly, students are not likely to self-motivate, and instructors lose the opportunity to redirect misguided students. Because I am literally not in the room with you guys when you're peer reviewing, you don't get to ask me quick questions. When I'm walking around a classroom during the peer review process, I get like 50 questions in one session. People are like, I don't know what this means. What's this? They raise their hand, I go over there, I answer a quick question, and I'm running around the room like running. And so I'm missing that opportunity online. That's not there. Now this research is interesting given that this is an online course and you're seeing how some of these findings might play into your own learning and what you're missing. So do you see here in my conclusion how I just went over the main thesis and my three main claims, and I have some supporting evidence, like the stuff I don't actually do any citations. I just go over the big overview of the supporting evidence I found. For instance, after this first claim, we see reflection is stunted in most online review systems because students are either not able to respond to their peers' comments or cannot respond to the comments as rapidly as face-to-face interaction. So that was some of the evidence that was presented exact in the paper using citations, but I'm just reiterating it here without citations. That's okay to do. So when we look over here on the left-hand side of the screen at what a good conclusion includes, that's what I mean by proof summary. That's what I mean by talking about just an overview of what the evidence showed for a particular claim. And then this happens again with the other two claims, the 2 and 3 here. So the most then that you would want to add on to a good conclusion beyond your thesis, your claims, and your proof summary, which is all I'm requiring for this class, the most you would add on to it is where your thesis is placed in the body of work. So instead of telling people what to do, I don't directly say here, okay, instructors, you should not use online peer review in your class. That's not practical. Plus, people would probably get really annoyed being told what to do. Instead, I talk about where my findings are placed in the bigger picture of all the other research studies that have been done. So I say these findings of this study are These findings place this study firmly in what Mossam terms the dialectical constructivism, a specific view of constructivism which learning occurs, and then it lists where learning occurs best. This study reiterates the sentiments of Vygotsky, who believes students require knowledge best in social contexts. Interaction between learners and their peers is a necessary part of the learning process. At the same time, students seem to provide more detailed and focused feedback using compute. So look, I do a little bit of the opposing viewpoint in my conclusion. I'm placing my thesis in larger works, telling whose side I'm on, but also some weaknesses in the thesis statement. This is important. If you ever go on to do a scientific study, you would have a limitations section, and your limitations or your results section, you would talk about where you went wrong, where your actual thesis statement might have been a little bit off. And then my final sentence, I do give slight guidance. Nevertheless, until computer-mediated systems overcome communication barriers, freshman composition instructors should be hesitant to replace the traditional peer review process with online peer review. Notice this reads like a new thesis statement. Notice the word should is in here, and we should not use the word should in research papers unless we're experts in the field. I'm not an expert in the field. Those are for more people advanced than me. So really, if you can get away with anything in a research paper, if you do a fantastic job, you do a lot of work, at the very last sentence of the paper, I will accept a little bit of guidance, but do not tell your reader what to do. Absolutely. That annoys people, right? I'm just calling for caution in the process. So conclusions are really straightforward. Thesis, claims, proof summary. In other words, just go over an overview of your evidence for each claim. And then if you want to, tell your reader where your thesis is in the big picture. And at the very end, if you do a good job, if you know you did a good job, you could give a little bit of guidance. I hope that clears up conclusions. Email me if you have any more suggestions or questions about suggestions for your own work, you want suggestions, or questions about conclusions. What I want to see are really clear, concise conclusions.